Alright, so this is like day 7 or something. A lot of stupid stuff has happened, I'll be honest. So as you can see, I have the old engine in the crate now, and the new engine on the hoist had a big problem with the crank bolt hole being stripped on the new engine on the crankshaft itself. That was a complete mess, and basically I had to use helical coil to fix it. Complete mess, killed like a whole day and a half for me, and had a bunch of other stuff going on, so there was another couple days in there that I wasn't able to show anything, unfortunately. So yeah, so I got one manifold on, exhaust manifold, I got the valve covers on, they're not torqued down, but they're on. I got the clutch and flywheel on, got the front pulleys on, and putting the intake manifold on, ran into an issue with this hole. And this, again, is on the new block, and it seems like the very end of it might have some slightly messed up threads. Not the end of the world, but messed up enough to where I cannot get the bolt all the way down to where it tightens the manifold down. So I was just, comparing to see if maybe I missed something, and if there was a shorter bolt in here compared to the others, but as you can see, they are all the same length. They're all identical. So what I'm going to do is pick one, and this is kind of not like the best idea, but I'm basically going to grind off the last couple threads on here. Probably focus. There we go. Probably about that much, and just bear them off, kind of like the shank on the end here. And just for the sake of time, because the only other option would be because the threads that are messed up are at the bottom of the hole, I would have to go out, find a tap for the thread pitch and diameter of this bolt, take the manifold off, cover stuff so the stuff doesn't get in the manifold, put the tap in there, run it through, and it would have to be a non-tapered tap as well. So usually most taps are tapered so that it can go in the hole and kind of center itself and clean out as it goes down, but it's not going to get the very end of the hole because it's tapered, so it's skinnier at the top. So I need to get a non-tapered one that will go all the way down in this size, then clean all that out, and I just don't have the time or patience really to deal with all that. So I'm going to do the super non-advisable but is going to save the day. Basically, take the minimum amount of threads off the bottom of this bolt so that the rest will still hold this in the manifold, well, in the head, to hold the manifold down, and then the rest, there aren't any issues with the rest of them. And then I can put the transmission on, get everything going, and get it in the car, which has been sitting there for over a week, and it's getting rained on with leaves, and it's just looking so sad, and it's making me sad because this car is really so nice to drive, and it's really, really dirty right now. I'm just really anticipating being able to drive it. So, this has been a process, and I haven't really been able to show as much of it as I want to. But I am showing what I can and what I have the time to. Quite the mess here in the garage. I usually try to stay pretty organized, but as you can tell, things kind of just started getting out of hand. So I'm going to keep working on this, and hopefully we're good to go from this point out. Alright, as you can see, I got it ground down here. Pretty decent, I guess, good enough for what I need to do with it. I'm going to file it as needed, and hopefully that will just be enough. So it seems to have worked. I'm able to get this spun in here reasonably well, and the difference is before, when it was tight, it would stop, probably about there, and there was a visible gap, obviously, and that's not tightening anything, it's not even touching. Now, it can go all the way down and keep going. If I use the wrench here even, it does indeed tighten down, and it is seating the gasket as it should be. So, dodged a bullet there, another bullet. Unfortunately, I wasn't so lucky with the crank. But, alright, so time to get to the rest of the stuff. Alright, and now the only real main accessory left to put on is the alternator, which is pretty simple. It pretty much sits on these two 10mm bolts, and then there's a bracket up here, and then there's a bunch of 8mm bolts that go onto it. And it's pretty simple. It's a good design for it actually came up. Instead of having it on a bracket way out on the side and maybe causing interference issues, they put it right here in the middle of the V of the engine, right in front of the intake, all packed in there. It's nice and compact. Doesn't stick out anywhere. Part of that is likely because the 1994 to 2004 chassis Mustangs is called the New Edge chassis, and it's just the redesigned version of the previous model range, which is known as the SN95, which is what refers to the 1994 to 1998 model years. Everything from 79 to 93 is the legendary Fox body chassis, but they're all the same underneath. They have the same front suspension, it's the same rear suspension. The only real differences are the body got a little bit bigger, a little bit stiffer. 5-lug was standard. They have slightly different spindle design and disc brakes all around, the newer you got. The New Edge like this, I think, is the best combination of power and chassis potential, but the engines are a little bit more complicated and a bit bigger. Your typical 302 small block that we actually have in this car, real quick, this is one of my roommate's cars that I mentioned he was going to be bringing in. This is a 1968 Ford Mustang Coupe, and it is actually an original 390 big block car, fairly highly optioned apparently, power brakes, power steering, all that stuff, AC, but you can't really see in there. He bought it from somebody else that supposedly put a 347 stroker, so it's got a small block in there. I won't pop it because it's not my car. Pop the hood to show you, but basically your typical small block would come out to like here, maybe somewhere in terms of like width. Compared to this modular engine, this is much wider. So when Ford changed from the the 5.0 that they had, which it was actually a 4.9 liter, but it's just semantics. They changed from that engine to the modular like this in 1996, because 1994 and 1995, even though they were in the new SN95 body style, they still used the 302 small block. In 96 they changed to the modular block, and because it's a little wider, they had to do certain things to make it fit. That's why the manifolds are so low profile. It's not the best for performance, but it gets the job done and it fits, and that's why they fit the alternator way in the middle of the V, away from the frame rails on the other side, so that it's easier to fit as well. Just your little tidbit of Ford history for the day. I'm going to get back to this and start bolting it up. Alright, now pretty much the last thing that I have to put on here before the engine is going to be ready to get installed back in the car is this. It's the combination oil filter stand and lower radiator hose water neck deal. Bolts up right over here, and engine did come with a gasket for it. And one thing I didn't show on the alternator was me torquing it, because I didn't. And that's not to say that you don't always have to torque everything. It's always great practice to torque everything, but in the interest of time, or if you really just don't know what the torque spec is, in a pinch, if it's not something that's being sealed, like with a gasket, like this is the alternator, and all it has to do is hold the alternator in place. And as long as it's tight enough, it's not going to go anywhere, and you know that the bolts are threaded properly, not cross-threaded. Everything's seated down properly, and it feels tight enough for that component, and with more experience you will know what tight enough is usually. The general rule of thumb is the bigger the bolt, the higher torque spec usually is. For instance, these are 10mm bolts, these are 8mm bolts. These are going to have to be tightened down harder than these, obviously. These are like, wrist tight. These you might want to use, 2 hands on the ratchet, but you don't need a breaker bar, or a cheater bar thrown on there to tighten it all up. However, for the filter stand water neck, it does have a gasket, and it does deal with both the cooling and oiling system of the engine, and those are neither of those are things that I'm willing to risk, just guessing on. So this one will be torqued to spec, of course, and we'll be making sure that the gasket's all nice and seated. One thing about these modular engines is that they actually have pretty much like O-ring style gaskets for everything. It's actually really nice. I don't know if there are any paper gaskets on this engine. Intake manifold, valve cover, water neck, this gasket, even the water pump. Water pump has its one big O-ring. This is like a really nice, there are grommets with individual O-rings for the bolt holes even. There are raised sections for each of the orifices in the gasket. It's actually like a really nice little gasket, and this is a legit OEM part. As you can see, the Ford's in there somewhere. It's there. It just won't focus, and there it is. So I know that I shouldn't, quote unquote, have any issues with it. So yeah, gonna throw it on, torque it up, and just in case you guys had any questions as to why I only showed certain things getting torqued, things that need to be torqued, I torque, trust me. All right, so this is day 11 total of the Mustang engine swap. I didn't work every day in those 11 days, but it's still kind of the total days. As you can see, the engine is finally in the car completely, completely physically within the engine bay. It's on the mounts, it's not bolted up yet, but it is sitting under its own weight, no longer on the jack. Everything is ready to get hooked back up. I've just got the harness laid out here, nothing is connected at all yet. Got the trans actually hanging free still, which is not amazing, to do to your mounts, but it's only been a little bit. So one of the main problems I had the last couple days was this. I borrowed this engine hoist from a friend, and the jack just started leaking on it. As you can see, yes, those are zip ties. It just started puking fluid out of it. Yeah, I think it's actually out of fluid now. Basically, you can still kind of see some of the residue here of the fluid just coming out of it. It ran out of hydraulic fluid, and the seal was busted on it, and it just didn't work. I picked up this jack, which should have been strong enough, and as you can see, that really didn't work out. I have no clue what happened there. It broke, bent, whatever. So at 11:30 at night, we ran to Walmart and picked up this jack, and that was our savior. It actually works. So, and I had to zip tie it on because this one was originally welded on, and I had to grind that off, pop it off. The way the mount works is as long as it's not going to slide off, the weight of the load on the arm actually does keep it in place because it's got a cleat here. Not the best idea, but for a temporary one-time use, and if you're very careful and you're working on flat ground, not bouncing it around and stuff, it can get the job done in a pinch. I do not recommend this. Do not recommend it, but I had to do it, just showing you what had to happen. Today is mostly going to be organizing tools back in place. I do need some of them to hook the engine back up. I need to reorganize some of the parts that came off the car. I got the radiator and cooling stuff over here. I got a lot of stuff in the box there in the baggies, and a couple other little bits floating around, transmission mounts and such. So yeah, the old engine is sitting there. I'm going to be working on, once the car's running, I'll be ready to ship that. Got the exhaust sitting here. Yeah, so things are winding down. I am very excited to drive this car. The couple times that I drove it, it was really nice. It really does drive as if this car was new. It's just so low mileage. I did have a good look underneath it, and all the bushings and stuff are in really good shape, and the car is in such good shape. I did, unfortunately, as you can see here, bump it with the hood when I walked by, and I'm not happy about that. it might actually look worse in the camera than it actually is. There's some dirt here as well. I'm not happy about that, but it's not really a scratch, it's more of a scuff. And I also accidentally bumped the hood against the ground. That I'm more concerned about, and I will be getting some touch-up paint for that little edge. Other than that, not really any casualties. This is where this mounts. It's a little stud for the radiator overflow reservoir deal, and this just kind of pops in there. I forgot it was there. There's another one over here, but when the engine was coming out, it did run into this, and it knocked it this way while it was still mounted in there. And so you can see it kind of bent the tab a little bit, but just a little bit. It should be okay. It will live. And this is all underneath a cover when it's in the car, so it's not really the end of the world. I am going to put some touch-up paint on that as well, so I don't get any corrosion setting in. So yeah, like I said, things are winding down. I might see if I can't get a time-lapse shot of me hooking all this up, and if that makes it in the video, I guess you'll see it. Otherwise, yeah, nothing too exciting today. I'm not even sure how I'm going to edit all this together. It could be one video, could be 2 videos, it could be a couple more, I don't know. But I hope you enjoy it. It's just kind of a, you know, bad timing in my life of when I had to do this, moving in and all. But, you know, it's just more experience, life experience, and car experience. You know, it's not a good situation for me since I did spend a decent amount of money getting the engine and parts and other stuff for it, but it will be hopefully all worth it. So yeah, thanks for watching.